Hi guys, Jay here from borntoproduce.com and welcome to our brand new Deep House course for Cubase 10 and 2019. This is the first lesson out of what is probably going to be about 30 lessons or so, and I'm so glad to have you with me. So let's open up a new project and get your settings sorted out. Oh, incidentally, if you haven't heard the track yet that we're about to make, then I'll put the link in the description below the video. So when you first load up Cubase, you always get the Steinberg hub. And if for some reason you don't, you can just come up to hub at the top here. So we want to create an empty project, so come to more and then click empty, or alternatively you can just click create empty down the bottom here. I always have prompt for project location selected, just so I can choose whichever folder I want to put my project in. So create empty. I've already set up a folder called Deep House 2019 tutorial. If you don't have one already, literally just go to obviously new folder on a PC or a Mac and just create your folder that you want to put it in and select the folder. Now the project is still called Untitled 1, so I'm just going to go File, Save As and type in my desired name, and press save. So now we're all set up, we've named our folder and lesson correctly. So now the next thing I want to do is just check our settings just before we bring in the kick drum. So go to Studio Setup. This is to check your sound card. Now on the drop down menu, I would normally have my sound card, Yamaha, Steinberg, selected here, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm using voice meter in terms of the routing. But for you, just select your sound card here. And if you don't have a dedicated sound card, then get one. Seriously guys, the one that comes with your motherboard is probably not that great. But if you don't have a dedicated one, then just choose generic low latency driver. Probably best to have audio priority on boost set as well down here. And one other thing we just need to check is the project settings. So go to project setup or shift and S. I normally have 44.1 sample rate because there's not that much difference between that and 48. It's very difficult to tell the difference, and it just tends to be a bit more compatible with other things, sample packs, that kind of thing, or bouncing it down to CD. It all has to be 44.1 anyway. I've got it set to 24-bit here just to give me a slightly more dynamic range than 16-bit. If you're not sure what that means, just Google dynamic range. I don't want to get into that here in this lesson one, but as I'm going to be recording vocals a bit later on, I definitely want a bit more dynamic range. So let's press OK. Right, so let's get started. Let's just press my G button a few times just to zoom out a touch. I'm just going to draw in a 4-bar loop. So I just come up to the top with my pencil. It turns into a pencil tool. Actually make sure my snap is on. So snap is on here, which means it will snap to the grid. And you can either have it on adapt to zoom, so when you zoom in and out, the quantize settings change accordingly, or you can just have it on, maybe use quantize and choose your quantize settings here. It's up to you really. Let's just have it on adapt to zoom for the moment, see how we get on. So let's just draw in a 4-bar loop to start with. We can always move this around later, we can always extend this loop later, so it doesn't really matter at this stage. Let's just get something in. And what I'm going to focus on here to start with, which is what I always start on when I make my tunes, is the main chorus, the main drop, if you like, of the track, because this is the most important part of the track. It's the part where everybody is in the club waiting for that big drop, and that's where it needs to happen. You need to have the most energy in this part of the track, and if you don't get this part of the track right, then your song's going to fail regardless. So that's why I will start on this to get it right. I'm going to go to File Browser, just in case you missed that. I'm in the right hand zone here, which you can open and close here at the top, and I'm on Media tab rather than VSTs. We're going to be going through all this as we go along, so don't worry about that. And I'm going to go to File Browser, which means I can look at the samples that are on my computer as opposed to the ones that come with it. Just go back quickly. So you go to Loops and Samples, which we will be doing a bit later. These are the samples that come with Cubase. But I'm just going to go to my own samples to get this first kick. I'm going to navigate to our own sample pack, which is Born to Produce House Tools 1. Don't worry, all these samples are included with this course. Everything we use will be in the work files when you purchase the course and download the work files. So I'm going to go to Kicks, So I'm just going to audition a few, and I've got autoplay on down on the results, so I can just click them and obviously they just play. Now there's plenty to choose from in this sample pack, which of course is available on the website, but I'm going to choose 13, and I'm not going to drag it into the project, which you could do, and it will drop the audio sample onto a track. I'm actually going to right click it and create a sampler track. Now the reason I'm doing that is so if I want to change my mind later on, rather than having to go in and replace all the kicks again and then drag out new ones, I can literally just drag a different sample, let's say, into the sampler, which is down here. So this is the sampler down here in the bottom window, which can be turned on and off with the middle zone button. All your zones are up here, by the way. And now my sample kick 13, which I dragged in, is in the sampler. And we're also on sampler control tab here. You can also obviously use the mixer, the editor window, or chord pads. We'll probably be coming on to all these things a bit later on. So we've kick 13 loaded into my sampler. I just need to trigger this now with a bit of MIDI. So I'm going to either choose your draw tool at the top, or you can press Alt or Option on the Mac and you automatically get the pen tool. So I'm just going to draw in one bar is actually enough, then we can duplicate it across, and you can see that the root key is C3, which means that this sample will be triggered as it is intended to be heard, as in the right pitch is on C3. So just double click the empty event that you've just created, come to C3, hold down Alt again, and just draw in 4 kicks. Let's just zoom in, make that a bit easier. I'm just using my H key to zoom in. You can of course come down here and zoom in with these slider controls here, and you can zoom up and down with these vertical slider controls. So it's just drawing my 4 kicks. I'm also going to turn this down, because if we start everything at 0 dBs, by the time we've got a few more tracks added together, obviously, and this track will probably end up with 40 or more tracks, we're going to be massively distorting and peaking. So what we do is we start off with the very first sound we bring into the project, which in my case is always a kick drum. We turn this right down, and let's just have a little look at the mixer and play this, what we've got so far, and you can see we're on about -12, which is absolutely fine. It gives us plenty of headroom when we start bringing in other tracks that are going to be, you know, summing together. Okay, so let's just duplicate that across. So with my block highlighted, I can just Control D or Command D 3 times, and just to set my loop in motion, I just click this loop button here, which turns my selection blue, which means when it gets to the end, it's going to loop round. So I'm just going to have a little look at the EQ here. I want to try and layer this kick up with something, because it's a little bit boring at the moment. It's a little bit, doesn't have that much impact. So the first thing I'm going to do is just EQ off the top end. So I'm going to come to high cut and just click and drag, and you'll hear the sound changing, all the top end coming off. So you can hear it's got a top end. You can hear that kind of click. But I want something with a bit more impact. So what I'm going to do is just EQ off this sample and layer it up with another bit of percussion or something like that. So now we've got rid of that click. Let's go and get something else to layer up with it. So what I'm going to do is just, rather than right click and create a sampler track again, I'm just going to literally right click this one and duplicate it. And while I'm here, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping and call this kick, and then shift and enter to make sure all these parts get named kick as well. Otherwise they will have the old name sitting there, which can be confusing. And with this one, I'm going to call this kick top or kick punch, whatever you want to call it. This is going to be the high end of the kick. Once again, shift and enter to not only name the track but the parts as well. Now obviously this second duplicated track has also got the kick 13 sample in it as well, which is no good. So what I'm going to do is come to Percussion, in House Tools 1, Sample Pack. Again, as I said before, this is going to be in the work files. When you purchase the course, it will all be included in there. Now some of these are not going to work, of course, not at all. But let's just try 38. Let's click and drag this into the sampler. So we're going to replace kick 13 with percussion 38. Let's just have a listen. And what we need to do is change that EQ. Because we duplicated the track, it's duplicated the EQ as well. So we're now EQing out the added top layer, which is obviously totally the wrong thing we want to do. And there you go. What we can do is just EQ out the low end of that top percussion, just so it doesn't conflict. So this is just the kick on its own, and this is with the layer. It's got a lot more punch to it. Now I do still think this kick needs a bit of EQ because it's just a little bit boxy sounding. So let's just take off the kick top at the moment, come to the edit channel settings, and let's see if we can find some of those boxy frequencies. What we're going to do is we're just going to click on here to activate one of these EQ points. Just going to make sure it's on parametric, which means we can click and drag this around. So what we're doing here is boosting at 320 Hertz, but it's also boosting quite a wide range of frequencies around it. Now we can change how wide or narrow this range of frequencies is by coming down to the Q factor, and we can click and drag this. So really I want quite a narrow band of frequencies, because what I'm doing here is trying to find the problem frequencies, and then when I do find the problem frequencies, I'll just reduce them a little bit. So this will make sense if I play, and I'm trying to find boxiness or muddiness. Sounds a little bit muddy there, so we'll just reduce that a little bit. Just a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 dB. And there's probably going to be another one. So let's just activate number 3 and do the same again. Just reduce the Q, make it more narrow. Sounds a bit sort of boxy and boomy down there as well, 102. So, oops. Now it's important to do before and afters whenever you do anything like this, so just check what you've done and make sure that you've done something that actually complements the audio rather than make it worse. And your bypass button is here, this little yellow dot here. So before and after. Just ever so slightly less boxy. Let's bring in the top again. Just bring down this top volume a little bit. And take it out just to make sure again. Okay, so we're in the ballpark there, and we can obviously adjust all this later once we bring in all the rest of the instruments. We'll be mixing this as we go basically, so all these things aren't set in stone, but it's just to get you in the ballpark, to get you started. So that's how you sort of layer up a kick with a top end to make it more punchy, and that's how to EQ out some of the boxiness or muddiness that some samples may have. And in this track I will be using a different kick in the verse, because the reason for that is I want the verses to be sort of laid back and mellow, because it is a deep house track after all, and I want the sort of impact to come in the chorus, which is this section here we're working on right now. So this kick is going to be a lot more punchier than the one in the verse, but we'll come on to that in later lessons. So very important just to check that we've got our housekeeping done before we move on to lesson 2. So everything is named correctly, and what I'll do is just make sure that things are coloured. I'll just have all my drums red for some reason. So I'm going to just make sure nothing is selected on the track and just have the channel itself selected. Come up to colours and click red, and do the same for this one. And that's it really for the first lesson. So in the next lesson we'll be adding some hats and some snares to get this beat driving along. If this video has been helpful to you, please do like and subscribe and click the bell notifications so you don't miss any more of these fabulous Cubase tutorials. Cheers guys, all the best. I'm Jay from BornToProduce.com, and I'll see you in the next lesson, lesson 2. See you later.